Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is Rakdos No Fun. Today I have a super spicy deck for you guys. It is a red-black Rakdos No Fun deck, as the title suggests. This is basically a deck that's going to be playing a lot of burn spells, playing a lot of removal spells, and then playing our big bombs like Hazoret, Glorybringer, or cutting to ribbons our opponent to death. But of course, before I get into the video, guys, make sure you hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to. Hit the bell right beside the subscription to make sure you know when we upload a new video and when we go live on stream on the channel right here. But without further ado, let's get right into it. And starting up at the 1 mana slot for 4 of, we have Bomat Courier, a great 1 mana 1/1 that has haste, and whenever Bomat Courier attacks, exile the top card of your library face down and pay 1 red mana, discard your hand, sacrifice Bomat Courier, put all cards exiled with Bomat Courier into their owner's hand. So this is a really great early game to mid game advantage, so getting in for some extra damage on the early game and then sacrificing this guy to fill up your hand with burn spells, removal spells, and again cut to ribbons or another bomb for you to play out in the mid to late game. So Bomat Courier is surprisingly good in the early game there. But moving on from this guy, we have 2 Rampaging Ferocidon. This is basically against the blue-white control deck, the approach decks, anything with life gain, honestly. Rampaging Ferocidon is 3 mana for 3/3 for with Menace, players can't gain life, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Rampaging Ferocidon deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So we only have 10 creatures in the actual board in this deck here. So this is actually not going to hurt us as much as we think, and it could possibly hurt us for 9 if we have a Rampaging Ferocidon or another one on the battlefield, possibly more, but that's probably not going to happen. This is going to be a card that's going to probably attract a lot of removal hate from our opponent, and if not, like say we're up against a blue-white control strategy and this hits the board, if they don't have a cast out and they cast Approach the Second Sun, well, it just puts it on the 7 below the top of the deck, but they don't gain that 7 life. It's way more crucial for Approach the Second Sun than it should be. And of course, one of the best bonus abilities for Rampaging Ferocidon is that it has Menace, so it can actually get in pretty frequently with 3 damage over and over again. But moving on from the Ferocidon, we have 2 Hazoret the Fervent. Because this is a burn and removal strategy, Hazoret the Fervent is going to be coming down, swinging in almost every time we play it, because our hand is going to be basically out of cards from either using Shock, Lightning Strike, Unlicensed Disintegration, all that kind of stuff, to melt our opponent down to where we can just get in for the Hazoret and win. And of course, if he's not swinging in the turn he comes down, we can of course pay 3 mana, discard a card, and deal 2 damage to each opponent, which is also very good as well. So Hazoret is going to be amazing for us. If they have Vraska's Contempt, that's going to be hard on us, and they gain 2 life because it's a great tempo swing for them. But more often than not, Hazoret's going to get in at least once or twice before they have a solid answer for it. But moving on from Hazoret, we have our top end Glorybringer. Because we're running red, I can't help but put Glorybringer in the main board here. It's a 5 mana 4/4 flying haste dragon. You may exert Glorybringer as attacks. When you do, it deals 4 damage to target non-dragon creature and opponent controls. So keep in mind, whenever you go up against a red deck, Glorybringer cannot kill another Glorybringer unless they hit head on with damage. So they can't do exertion to exert to hit another Glorybringer. So that's something to keep in mind, but it can hit dinosaurs. It's not a dragon, or it's not a dinosaur after all. So it can do a non-dragon creature, so it's going to hit a dinosaur, which is awesome. But again, just like Hazoret, it's going to come down swinging in and doing a ton of damage. That's going to be all of our creatures, actually. We only have 10 in the deck. So moving on to spells, we have 23 of those. Let's move on to those. We have 2 Fatal Push. Again, a 1 mana black instant. Destroy target creature if it has converted mana cost 2 or less. And of course, Revolt. Destroy that creature if a converted mana cost 4 or less, instead of a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. Most of the time, we're just going to get this off for early turn advantage. So if they have a Bomat Courier against us, or if they have any kind of like ramming up red strategies like a Earthshaker Kinra, things like that, Fatal Push is going to take care of that pretty frequently. If they don't have anything like that, we can always get rid of a Heart of Kiran, things like that. But if we have a situation where we need to have a Revolt trigger, we can have a Revolt trigger happen pretty frequently, as we have a couple deserts in the deck here to be able to get a Revolt trigger off going pretty smoothly. And Fatal Push is going to kill something with 4 mana or less. But there's only 2 in the deck because I wanted to focus a little bit more on burn instead of removal. So moving on from Fatal Push, we have 4 Shock. This is a 1 red mana instant. Shock deals 2 damage to our creature or player. So this is a great way to either copy it with a Primal Amulet, because you know that's in the deck, or you can just shock your opponent's face or shock down a creature in the early game. So copying it to do 4 damage or just doing 2 damage to the face to finish up a match is fine too. So I think Shock is great for that. But moving on from Shock, we have of course our Lightning Strikes from the new set from Ixalan. So 2 mana Lightning Strike deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Lightning Strike's amazing. and with a Primal Amulet on the battlefield, it becomes 1 mana, which makes it basically the Lightning Bolt that we all desperately want. So Lightning Strike is really great for that. And of course, if we double it again, it does 6 damage instead of 3, so you can actually pick different targets for those as well. So 3 to the face or 3 to a creature, I think that's pretty cool too. Moving on from Lightning Strike though, we have 1 Torment of Hellfire. This is a 2 black mana and X sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So let's say we have a Primal Amulet flipped on the battlefield. We can do this twice in a row. And as long as it's not countered, it's basically going to win you the game outright, which is ridiculous. And I love it so much. But it's only a 1-of in the deck because Torment of Hellfire is kind of one of those cards that if you get into it in the early game, it's kind of a dead card in your hand for a very, very long time. You definitely want to be pulling this into the mid and late game. But moving on from Torment of Hellfire, we have 2 Walk the Plank. This is a main board that's probably going to come out in the sideboard if we're up against a Merfolk strategy, but it is a 2 black mana, destroy target non-Merfolk creature. Even though it's sorcery speed removal, Walk the Plank is still premium removal against any strategy that is a high creature strategy or a high like bomb strategy. So anything against a green-red ramp deck or dinosaur deck, something like that, Walk the Plank is going to do really well against that. But moving on from Walk the Plank, we have 2 Sweltering Suns. This is of course going to be dealing against the token strategy that are going all over standard at the moment. And of course, if we don't need Sweltering Suns because it does 3 damage to each creature, we can cycle it away for just 3 mana as well. So being able to cycle this away makes it a great main board inclusion here. We have some more board wipes in the sideboard, but Sweltering Suns is just too good not to include since it does give us that flexibility to cycle it away if we need to. But moving on from Sweltering Suns, we have 2 Unlicensed Disintegration. Because we have a lot of things that actually give us artifacts on our side of the field, Unlicensed Disintegration is going to deal 3 extra damage to our opponent too, but it is also unconditional removal against a target creature as well. So instant speed, 3 mana, destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller, and that's usually going to be always going to be happening against a creature style strategy. So Unlicensed Disintegration is amazing for that, but if we're up against a more control strategy, this card's probably going to come out for something else in the sideboard. Moving on from this card though, we have 4 Cut to Ribbons. I know I thought about putting just 3, but I think 4 is really the good inclusion here. 4 is great for us because, again, deals 4 damage to target creature, and when it goes to graveyard, it has Ribbons, which is a black, and X. Each opponent loses X life, and when copied with the Primal Amulet or Primal Wellspring, it can basically mean the end of the game for us. We have Torment of Hellfire, Cut to Ribbons. Those are our 2 basic win conditions with the Primal Amulet or Primal Wellspring once it's flipped. But we also have Hazoret the Fervent and Glorybringer as win conditions as well. So this is just a deck that has a lot of answers just in case they get rid of things that we really need to make work. But Cut to Ribbons is an amazing removal card. And one of the things that I like doing is actually using Cut on like a Bomat Courier if it's not going to be useful for me in the mid to late game, just so I can get that extra counter on top of a Primal Amulet so it can flip and then I can Ribbons the following turn or something like that. So that's a really good interaction there for us too. But moving on from Cut, we have 2 Never to Return. So there are some Planeswalkers that are kind of like hard to deal with right now. I would say Vraska Relic Seeker is ridiculous if he gets on the field for us. We definitely don't want that lasting more than 1 turn, and Never to Return is going to help deal with that in the main board, so we can destroy target creature or planeswalker, and then sorcery can actually exile a card for us, so like a Scrapheap Scrounger, things like that with Embalm or Eternalize. I keep wanting to say Entomb, but it's not Entomb. Entomb it's not in this set. I don't know why I keep saying that in my brain. But Never to Return is a great card for us for that, as well as we can actually copy these again if we have Primal Wellspring on the battlefield. So we can actually kill 2 things, 2 planeswalkers, and in return we can actually exile 2 cards and get 2 2/2s, which is good for us. But moving on from this, we have our artifact 3 Primal Amulet. It's a 4 mana artifact. Instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Primal Amulet. Then if there are 4 or more charge counters on it, you may remove those counters and transform it. And once it transforms, you can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool and use that mana to cast a instant or sorcery spell, and you may copy that and choose new targets for the copy. So that's going to be our way we're going to win with the Ribbons. That's going to be our way we're going to win with a Torment of Hellfire, things like that. That means Primal Amulet is going to be a huge target on our side of the field for our opponent to try and get rid of in game 2 if they're in red with like a Braid, or if they're in white with a Cast Out or Ixalan's Binding, things like that. So Primal Amulet is not necessarily going to win you the game every single time because we do have other ways to win the game, and it's going to be a big target if we have it out on the game 1. So we kind of want to be more conservative in game 1 whenever we're playing the game, because if they see a Primal Amulet in game 1, they're going to want to board in some removal for it. So I would almost say don't play this in game 1 and then just kind of be your Torment of Hellfire strategy, be more of a Hazoret or a Glorybringer strategy, and then in game 2 kind of surprise them with a Primal Amulet. So if by game 3 they have answers for it, but by then you've also been ahead of game. I hope that makes sense. It's sort of like how the Green Red Pummeler strategy on MTGO has a kind of like weird way of being like, oh, I'm Temur Energy, but by the time sideboard comes in and I don't sideboard in like a Braid, they get that 2-0 by then playing their Pummeler on game 2 and me going, oh, I didn't realize this was a Pummeler deck because it's so similar to an energy deck. So that's a really good way to kind of trick your opponent into not sideboarding against cards that are in your deck. But that is it for all the cards in the deck besides lands. Let's go over those. We have 2 Canyon Slough. This is going to be a card that's of course going to tap for red or black mana, but it can also be cycled to draw some more cards if we're kind of like heavy on land, which can happen from time to time because we'll be burning so many spells. That can be great. And then moving on from that, we have Dragonskull Summit, which is again a great card because if it's a good buddy land, because if we have a swamp or mountain on the field, it comes in untapped and can tap for black or red as well. So that's really great for us. Then we have 1 Field of Ruin because all of these like legendary lands and like tap lands that are coming in and from Ixalan need to be dealt with basically immediately. Search for Azcanta once it's flipped is something that you do not want a control deck to have at all, and Field of Ruin is going to deal with that immediately. But I wouldn't put out Field of Ruin until that card flips, so you can then play Field of Ruin and then destroy that card immediately. Because if they see that you have Field of Ruin on the battlefield, they're probably not going to flip and just use Search for Azcanta's top ability, which is still very good for them regardless. But what we want them to do is to flip, and so we can kill it with Field of Ruin. I think that's much better. Then moving on from Field of Ruin, we have 4 Ramming Up Ruins. This is a great way to just basically get that last couple points of damage for our opponent, so we can actually kill them to finish out the game. And Ramming Up Ruins is going to help us do that. We have 4 of those. We have 1 Scavenger Grounds right after this. So we actually have 5 deserts in the main board here that we can actually sacrifice for Ramming Up Ruins. But if not, we can use Scavenger Grounds again to get rid of any kind of Godfarrow's Gift strategy, any kind of Eternalized or Embalm strategy, and of course the Scrap Heap Scrounger that likes to come back turn over turn. So Scavenger Grounds is going to be a great way to deal with that too. And then moving on from those, we have of course 6 Mountain and 6 Swamp, and that is the full 60 of the main board of the deck. Again, the strategy is to be super aggressive, burn your opponent's face, burn your opponent's creatures, and remove them as quickly as possible. Then get out your big bombs like Hazoret, Glorybringer, or Cut to Ribbons your opponent to death, or Torment of Hellfire your opponent to death. There's just a lot of different ways you can win here, and they're no fun for our opponent. But let's say we're up against a really heavy control strategy or a lot faster aggro strategy. Let's go to the sideboard and see what we can do. The first card on the sideboard, we have 2 Chandra's Defeat. This is a great card against a Glorybringer, of course, a Chandra that's going to be a headache to deal with. Anything like that in the Round Up Red strategy, or maybe the Temur Energy strategy where they play out a Chandra and they can just destroy a Glorybringer right out the bat. Chandra's Defeat is going to help deal with that immediately, so that can hopefully not happen against you, or destroy a Glorybringer immediately. Anything else like that, of course, it also destroys any kind of the green-red dinosaurs, all that kind of stuff. And it can also get rid of any kind of early game threat in the Round Up Red strategy. So Chandra's Defeat is just an all-around amazing card against red, and that's why it's in the sideboard here. But moving on from it, we have 2 Duress. This is a 1-mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from that, and that player discards that card. This is a great card against control. This is an amazing card against blue-white approach, because you play this on the turn 1 or turn 2. They had an approach in their hand. It goes to the graveyard. They only have 2 more approaches in their deck, and it's going to be more difficult for them to kind of win that match. So Duress is an amazing card for us. They're always going to come in against a blue-white approach deck, or any kind of control deck really, or any kind of like deck where we know they have a lot of removal in the board and we want to try and get our creatures out as quickly as we can. I think Duress is going to help us with that. Moving on from this card, we have 2 Harsh Scrutiny. This is going to be up against any kind of like God strategy. This is going to be up against any kind of aggressive strategy like a Round Up Red again, but it can also be really good against a Locust God, Scarab God, anything that has like a really annoying recursion, or maybe a Torrential Gearhulk. It just grabs a creature card, puts it in the graveyard, and then we get to scry one. So we actually have the option to look at the top card of our library and put it on top or bottom. So Harsh Scrutiny does a lot for us, and it's really great. But of course, moving on from Harsh Scrutiny, we have 3 Braid, because Godfarrow's Gift deck, Torrential Gearhulks, and other Gearhulks in the set are an annoyance, so a Braid's gonna help deal with that completely. And of course, we need 3 of them because the consistency of getting out a Braid in the game 2 is much more important than you would originally think. So I made sure to include 3 Braid in the sideboard here. And of course, it's also just a 3 damage to target creature too, so it can be used as a removal spell as well. So if you're up against a heavy aggressive strategy, a Braid is gonna be really great for that too. Moving on from a Braid though, we have 2 Aethersphere Harvester. So one of the interesting things about the deck is that while we don't necessarily need a lot of life, we do need to last long enough to get our kind of strategy going, and Aethersphere Harvester is going to help us do that. It's going to be a great creature to crew with our 10 creatures and actually get in for some lifelink damage. That's not necessarily going to be one of those things that we're going to board in all the time. It's just one of those strategies where if they have like a ton of removal or a ton of like heavy control, we could play this out as a attractor of removal, so we can play out our Hazoret later or our Glorybringer later. So one of the things is I like playing Aethersphere Harvester out really early because they like casting out, like a blue-white approach deck likes casting out Aethersphere Harvester just to make sure that they don't have any like extra 3 damage coming to their face. They're happy to take Bomat Courier to the face like turn over turn, but at Aethersphere Harvester, I mean, they probably will just immediately cast that out. So that's gonna be one of those cards where you might just want to play it just for the removal attraction, but it's also very good at getting you life if it does get in. And of course, the added advantage of being able to block a Heart of Kiran because it does have 5 toughness. bonus. Moving on from this card, we have 1, Bontu's Last Reckoning. This is a 3-mana sorcery, destroy all creatures, lands you control, don't untap during your next untap step. So this is a card going to be basically against a token-heavy strategy that you really need like a last chance stop defense against their strategy, and Bontu's Last Reckoning is going to help do that. It's one of those cards where, of course, you're going to be happy when you use it, but you're going to be down basically an entire turn unless you have a lot of mana for the next turn. So Bontu's Last Reckoning is, of course, a last-ditch effort. Next up, we have 2 Vraska's Contempt, a 4-mana instant, exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. Vraska's Contempt is super good, again, against a planeswalker-heavy deck. We want to get rid of any kind of Nissa's, Vital Force, we want to get rid of any kind of Vraska Relic Seeker. We can Vraska's Contempt the other Vraskas. So it's a great way to get rid of those, and it's a great way to get rid of any kind of Locust God, Scarab God, that kind of stuff, because it does exile the target, so it doesn't hit the graveyard at all, and it does give us some life points as well. So, and it's an instant. So I mean, like, even though it's not Hero's Downfall for me, it's still an amazing card in this standard, and I would always put this in the sideboard, if not the main board, just to replace it for the Never to Return, just in case. It's kind of up to you on the meta for that, but I do like Never to Return in the main board because it can exile later. But Vraska is a great way to just deal with it completely and efficiently. And the last card in the deck for us, or in the sideboard, is Hour of Devastation, a 5-mana sorcery. All creatures lose indestructible until end of turn. Hour of Devastation deals 5 damage to each creature and each non-bolus planeswalker. So Hour of Devastation is a card that's going to be coming in definitely for up against a Round-Up Red strategy, or we're up against a Hazoret, or a Scarab God strategy, all that kind of stuff, where we know that Amonkhet Gods are indestructible. They're hard to deal with, but Hour of Devastation is going to help deal with them completely, and it also has the off chance of hitting a planeswalker as well. So Hour of Devastation is great for that. And that is the full 75. Let me go to the list here real quick. Rakdos No Fun. It is coming in at about 80 tickets on MTGO Traders. I think on paper it's about 160, 170, something like that. But it's a really fun deck. It has a lot of great removal and burn in it. And there's a couple ways to win with Hazoret the Fervent, with Glorybringer, with Cut to Ribbons, and with, of course, Torment of Hailfire. So there's a lot of different ways we can actually win the match. And of course, we can also just burn our opponent to a crisp with Shocks, Lightning Strikes, and even sometimes an Unlicensed Disintegration if we have artifacts on our side of the field. So it's a really great strategy to people that really like to deal a lot of damage to their opponent. But that is it for the deck tech, guys. I appreciate you guys. If you liked the video, of course, if you liked it, subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future, and hit the bell right beside it to make sure you know when we upload new videos and when we go live on the stream right here on YouTube. But I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video.